Good morning everyone, welcome to our festive cook-along. I know it's been a while since we've done a cook-along, so apologies for that, we've been very busy. But you are going to love this recipe. I thought as a change really from a traditional Christmas cake, I would show you how to make your own gluten-free panettone, which is a brilliant festive Italian version of a Christmas cake. Also, I know a lot of people have asked me about gluten-free pastry. We have got a recipe for the puff pastry on our website, but I will talk you through how you make some really good gluten-free short crust pastry for things like mince pies, because I always make up a big batch of pastry, keep it in my fridge, and then it's ready for either sweet or savoury things. So it's a really good standby recipe, so I'll talk you through that as well. So this is the gluten-free panettone. You do need to allow quite a lot of time for proving. It's actually a really simple recipe, and I'm going to just talk you through the ingredients. Just to say as well, a lot of people have asked about where the recipe is. The recipe will be on the website, so if you look under recipes, you'll see that one will come up probably in about the next half an hour. So you'll get all the ingredients for this cake recipe as well. Nice thing is as well, you can make it in advance, and what you can do is wrap it up, but what I actually do is wrap it up here, and then I prick it, and then I will temporarily, well not temporarily, but I will from time to time spike it with a little bit of brandy or rum or something like that, and that just keeps it really moist. So in a way you're going to treat it just like an ordinary Christmas cake, make it in advance, and then almost be spiking it with a little bit of brandy or rum, and that makes it really, really lovely and moist when you come to eat it. So let me talk you through the recipes. I'm just going to move that here. Now you don't need a food processor, but it saves you an awful lot of time, and quite frankly, you know, life's too short, let's just make it easy. So I'm going to talk you through the recipe, the ingredients first. So what we've got in here, this is strong gluten-free bread flour. So I'm actually using the Dove's Farm gluten-free bread flour. Try and use a bread flour for this rather than just a plain flour, self-raising flour, because you almost need to treat this like a bread because it's a yeasted bread. So we've got 500 grams of that. Then we've got 2 sachets of the fast-acting yeast. That is really the best one to use, and what I've got in here is, now I'm going to keep this dairy free as well, so I've got here 140 grams of almond milk, and I'm going to just tip in the yeast into this. Now I warmed this up very briefly in the microwave just for about 10 seconds or so, just to really keep that nice and warm. Then to that we want to feed the yeast. So we're going to add in about 30 grams of caster sugar. Now this is where you do need some sugar, because that's really going to feed the yeast. I've kept this actually a very low sugar cake, in the sense of the traditional cakes would actually contain an awful lot more sugar than this, probably double, even more. So I've just kept the sugar down because I don't actually think you need it when you taste it, because it's got dried fruit in anyway. Then to feed the yeast, I like to add just a spoonful of flour. So part of that flour just put in and just quickly mix that up. Welcome everyone if you just joined us, we've only just started. I'm just talking you through the first part of the recipe. Just to say as well, if you've just joined us, that the whole of the recipe, all the instructions, all the ingredients will be on the website probably in about half an hour. So please don't worry if you've missed the ingredients and the weights. So in here, just to recap, I've got 2 sachets of the fast-acting yeast, I've got 30 grams of caster sugar, and I've got a tablespoon of the gluten-free flour to feed it, and 140 grams of almond milk. You can use regular milk, I just want to keep this dairy free. Now I've mixed that together. Just leave that for about a minute or so, and that's really just going to start feeding, proving, and it just speeds up the process. This is not a recipe that you can do within minutes. You can prepare it very quickly, but it needs proving, and it needs a double proof. So you do have to just allow yourself a bit of time during the day just to leave it alone and then come back to it. But actually making it so easy, very, very easy. So the rest of the flour we're going to put in a food processor, just really to make it easy. Now you don't have to, you could just mix this up in a big bowl, but to be honest, it's much quicker and much simpler just putting it all in the food processor. So this is the rest of the bread flour. So I'm just going to put that in. Now, I know not everyone likes using gum, but it does really help it stick together. So if you don't want to use xanthan gum, which is what I've got in here, it's just a teaspoon, then use something like psyllium husks, flaxseed, ground chia seed, just to really help it bind a little bit more together. You can do it without, because we're using quite a few eggs, and what eggs do when you're making gluten-free products, they really help to bind things together. So in here I'm putting the xanthan gum, and I'm also just putting a little bit of baking powder. Again, it just gives it that lightness, which is great. Welcome everyone, if you're just joining us, I know you're joining us. If you want to post any questions as we go through, please do. We've got someone who's answering the questions, so please just post them. And just to remind you, the recipe will be on the website probably in about half an hour, so you'll have all the ingredients and all the instructions. So the rest of the caster sugar is going in here. Now, because a lot of people like to obviously keep the sugar low, you could replace half of that sugar with something like erythritol or xylitol, or even a little bit of stevia. That's really just to give the sweetness, because I've already got a bit of sugar in here that's feeding the yeast. You do need some sugar to feed the yeast, so you will need some in there. So I've got my sort of all my dry ingredients in there. I'm just going to quickly whiz that together, and then we're going to add more of the wet ingredients. So you just really want to quickly just pulse that. Now I'm actually using just an S-blade, because this is almost, although it's a yeasted product, it's almost like a cake. So I wouldn't necessarily put in here the dough blade if you've got a dough blade. I would just use your ordinary S-blade. So the richness of this cake comes from the combination of, now I'm using just a dairy-free butter. You could use coconut oil, you could use butter. But the richness is coming from this, and also eggs, and we've got a lot of eggs in this recipe. So the first thing you're going to do is put in your, now I'm just using a dairy-free spread or butter, and you're going to blitz that together almost like you were making a cake or a pastry, and this will become quite crumbly. You just want to get that mixed in. So that is 200 grams. So you really just want to blend that in almost as if you were making a pastry. Just from the sides of the food processor, just flick that down, because you want all of the cake mixture to really be combined properly when you add the wet ingredients. Okay, so the wet ingredients. So I've got in here 5 eggs. So those are going in straight away. And then to that, you add your yeasted mixture. Now, Chris, I don't know if you can just do a quick close-up, but it's just worth showing you that even within that 1 or 2 minutes that I've been talking, you can see that the yeast is already frothing. So that's a really good sign. We want almost to kick-start this cake recipe. So thank you, Chris. So I'm going to pour that in. So you want to see that frothiness before you add it to your cake mixture. Now, when you are frothing it, bear in mind you don't want that milk to have been too hot. You literally want it very lukewarm when you're feeding that yeast. If it's too hot, you're going to kill your yeast. So make sure it wasn't too hot. And I'm going to blend that up, and this will form quite a stiff batter. Now, as you blend it, the xanthan gum will help it to sort of stick together a bit more. So Chris, can I just ask you to do a quick close-up of the batter, if you can, just really to show people what it's like, and then we're going to add in, if I just move that out so you can see that. Can you see that? All right. So it's quite thick. Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. So it is like a very thick cake batter. And then I'm going to add the dried fruit. Now, traditionally, you would have a mixture of dried fruit, so mixed dried fruit and candied peel. And they would actually, normally the Italians would add a lot of candied peel. Now, if you're not a big fan of candied peel, you could just substitute it for either another type of dried fruit. So cranberries would be lovely, dried cranberries or dried cherries would be really lovely. Or they would also often add almonds to it. Now, my kids are not keen on lots of almonds, so I've omitted the almonds, but what you could do is replace half of the dried fruit with some either flaked almonds or chopped and blanched almonds. That would be really nice. And what we're then going to do, and just one more ingredient, is about a tablespoon of brandy. I don't actually think that's traditional, but I like it. So that's going in as well. And then this is just going to be pulsed, because what we don't want to do is we don't want it to be all chopped up. So just going to pulse that. Brilliant. Okay, and that is really all you need to do. I mean, it is really simple. The next bit is really just waiting for it to prove. So let me just show you what the mixture looks like. So Chris, if you could just perhaps do a close-up as I tip it in. So the first thing you need to do is obviously take it out of your food processor, and ideally use a glass bowl. This is going to be proving now for about an hour. That's the first proof. So I'm going to just tip this in and leave it in a warm environment, and also cover it with some cling. And you will need the first proving, so it will need 2 provings. You're going to need to leave it for an hour. And you will see after an hour or so, it will start to puff up. Now remember, it's quite a heavy, dense recipe. It's not like just an ordinary bread. So it's not going to rise as much as perhaps an ordinary bread would. So I tend to use, as everyone knows, my little free shower caps. Thank you, Chris, for getting these when you last went away. That's really helpful. So literally just cover it, leave it in a warm environment for an hour. That's your first proof. Then, yes, I have got one that I've prepared earlier. So this has had, now what you can also do, which is really quite useful if you're just short on time, is you can actually prepare the dough like we have in advance, cover it for an hour, and then put it in the fridge overnight. And that way you can just save yourself a bit of hassle. The next morning you can just take it out and then you can spoon it into your tin. Then it's going to need another hour. So you can see that although it doesn't require much attention, you do need to allow yourself time. But let me just show you the tin first. Now this is a Panettone tin. I got mine from Lakeland, and it's around about 16 centimetres across, and sort of probably about 12 centimetres high. Now you can get these very cheaply, but you don't have to use these sort of tins. So I think we just got a question. Hang on a minute.
Angelique really likes the recipe.
Hi, Angelique.
Really keen to make it. She wants to know, is this dairy free too?
Yes. So the question was, is it dairy free? Yes, it is dairy free. You don't have to be dairy free. My kids are dairy free, so it is dairy free. So I've used, instead of regular butter, I've used a dairy free spread. You could use coconut oil as well. Coconut oil tends to make it a little bit hard, that's the only thing, so I prefer a dairy-free spread. Instead of ordinary milk, I've used almond milk, so it's easy to make it dairy-free, so absolutely fine. Now, going back to the tin, this is a Panettone tin, and it's traditional that it's very high. Now, if you don't have one, don't panic. What you can do is you can use an ordinary spring-form cake tin. Try and get a small one, so something around about 16 centimetres, 20 centimetres. And then, like you would almost a Christmas cake, get grease-proof paper or parchment paper and wrap it round the top of the cake and just seal it, so that you have effectively a little lid, because it will rise slightly. So these are actually really cheap. So if you are keen on making one, I would suggest just picking one up from Lakeland or somewhere similar. I've just greased this with dairy-free spread. You could use something like olive oil instead. And then I'm going to spoon in This is a dough that I made, or cake batter rather, that I made last night. So I've had this proving, and I'm just going to spoon in and show you the next stage. So you would have allowed your cake to have risen for an hour. Then you would spoon it into your cake tin, and you're going to cover it again and leave it for another hour. So time-wise, yes, it takes a bit of time. Effort-wise, it doesn't. It's so good. In fact, if anything, I think it's easier than making ordinary Christmas cake. So welcome everyone. I'm really glad you're joining us. Chris, if you could just do a quick close-up, just so everyone can see what the cake looks like. So because I'm going to allow this another hour, I'm just going to spoon it in. You want to just smooth the surface. It will rise. And so you can see that there is, even in this high cake tin, there's still time, or space rather, for it to rise. It will rise. So you're going to then again cover this, leave it for an hour. Now we're going to skip that bit of leaving it. So I'm going to show you the next stage. Preheat your oven. So during that hour, about 15 minutes before, preheat your oven 180 degrees C. Now this is quite important, the temperature, because we actually reduce the temperature halfway through cooking. Now what you want is to get a really nice glaze. So you need a little bit of beaten egg. Now what some people do as well is that they would sprinkle on the top some either flaked almonds or just blanched whole almonds. A bit like you would when you're making your own Christmas cake. You could position your almonds over the top. I'm just going to brush it with some beaten egg. So get your oven at 180 degrees C. Now, 25 minutes. Put the timer on, 25 minutes, 180 degrees C. Then you're going to reduce the temperature to 150. You're going to cook it again for another 35 minutes. Now, if you find that the cake is browning too much, cover it with foil. I tend to, in that last 35 minutes, cover it with foil. And then when you insert a skewer, it should come out clean. So effectively, you're cooking it for 60 minutes. So I'm going to put that one in. So this one is going to be, whoops, let me move the, so this one I'm going to do 25 minutes, then another 35 minutes. When it comes out, you want to leave it in the tin for about 5 minutes before unwrapping, and then leave it on your cooling rack for about half an hour before you start sort of diving in. Another question, sorry.
It's more of a comment from Karen. She said she loves...
Hi Karen, lovely to see you.
I think she's after some of your secrets. She says, I love that it looks like you're using a paintbrush. Fab idea.
Actually it is a paintbrush. Let me just show you. Yeah, this is what I use for glazing anything. I've got several of these. So I've got a pastry brush, which is basically a paintbrush, that I always keep dry. So when I'm making certain pastries, I will keep one dry. And then I have another couple of these for glazing of different things, because ideally when it comes out and it's still warm, what I would tend to do is, if you want a really nice sheen on it, I would heat up a little bit of something like apricot glaze, or apricot jam rather. You could just use a little bit of honey, and then just glaze it while it's still warm. So once it comes out the oven, leave it in the tin for about 5 minutes. It just then makes it easier for it to come out. Then put it on a cooling rack, and then at that point just warm up some apricot glaze, glaze the top, and you get a really nice sort of glossy finish. I think you can see that there. And we'll cut into it. Yeah, do you want to do a close-up, Chris? And I'll cut into it as well so people can see. Now, when I was saying that obviously, you know, it is still a couple of weeks before Christmas, what you can then do is wrap it in some foil and then prick the top and just drizzle over some brandy from time to time until you want to eat it. This will keep just like a Christmas cake for quite a long time. And actually, it's nicer if you leave it and then spike it. So shall I just, let me just cut through so you can see what it looks like. So this one, I literally made last night. My kids are really excited to try it, even though it is a bit early for Christmas. Now it is very rich, but you can see there, that's cooked all lovely and through and still nice and moist, because that's one of the things with gluten-free cakes, is that sometimes they can be a little bit dry. So I'm hoping, can you see that all right? Let me just turn it round a bit so you can see that. And that is literally how you make a gluten-free panettone. It is that easy, very, very easy. Now, while we're here, let me just show you, or talk you through as well, easy mince pie pastry and a recipe, because I know a lot of people have actually been emailing me asking me. So just to remind you, with the panettone cake, the recipe, it should be on my website, christinebailey.co.uk, in about half an hour. So it will be up there, all the ingredients, all the instructions, and I really hope you try this recipe because it's absolutely divine. It's such a lovely recipe, and it also, because of the way it looks, it's a really nice present. So, you know, you could make up a few of these and then just, you know, wrap them up nicely and give them away as a present. So much better than a lot of shop bought stuff. So that's the panettone cake. But one thing that I do, which is very traditional, is I make my own mincemeat. And I will, again, I do tend to sort of inoculate this in a bit of brandy. and to keep it nice and fresh. But all I really do is get a great big bowl, a load of different dried fruits chopped up, normally 2 apples and a pear chopped up, and I often will stick it in the food processor just to blitz it up. Some fresh orange juice, some orange zest, a nice load of brandy or rum, and that's it. And then I just leave it, and I keep it in the fridge or in a Kilner jar in the fridge. Sometimes if I'm making up a big batch, I might freeze it. It will keep in the freezer for 3 months. And then you've got your own mincemeat, and that way it's got no suet in there, and there's no need to add any extra fats or fillers. There's no fructose syrup in there. If you look at a lot of the labels of mincemeat, they all contain fructose syrup. So you don't need to have any of that in there at all. And this will keep in the fridge, you know, for a month or so, partly because it's got some brandy in there as well. But that's a really easy way of making your own mincemeat. I think we have another question.
Question from Karen: which brandy would you use for celiac?
That's a really good question. I mean, most brandies actually are gluten-free. You do have to just double check the recipe, on the ingredients rather. The other ones that some people use is, obviously you could use, there are some really nice mulled ciders, they're all gluten-free as well. And rum generally is gluten-free. You just have to be a little bit careful from one brand to another. I tend to always double check the Celiac UK directory, and that will just list any changes. I think this one was a Waitrose one, but I can't be sure. But most of them are gluten-free. I tend to find people react to some whiskies, even if they say they're gluten-free, because they're often grain-based. So let me quickly show you, or just tell you what the pastry is, because a lot of people struggle with gluten-free pastry. Again, I tend to make up quite a batch and I keep it in the fridge. Or again, you can freeze it, really easy. So this is my standard recipe for short crust. If you look on the website, there is already one for puff pastry, and there is a YouTube, and it was Facebook Live, how to make your own puff pastry. That takes more time. Obviously, a lot of people like to use puff pastry for mince pies as well, but if you just like to use short crust, then this is a really good one. So the combination is very straightforward. 360 grams of plain gluten-free flour. Again, on my website, there is a blog on how to make your own flour mix that's gluten-free, but you can just use something like the Dove's Farm plain flour. It doesn't have to be the bread flour, just plain flour. 360 grams. To that, I add 175 grams of either butter or a dairy-free spread if you're dairy-free, a teaspoon of xanthan gum or something similar, so psyllium husks, flaxseed ground up, chia seeds, apple pectin fibre, all of those work. And then about a quarter of a teaspoon of salt. Then you blitz that up in the food processor, add 1 egg, and then just a dash of water until you form a pastry, and that's it. And that works really, really well. But of course, the other tip when you're rolling out pastry, I'll just show you, is, to be honest, always use cling film. Some people I know like to use baking parchment, but you don't add any flour to your pastry, because if you do, it just dries up. And when you've made your pastry, make sure that it tends to be on the wet side, because what you'll find is that you need that extra wetness when you're rolling it out. And with what I find with just short crust pastry, if I'm just using it to make a mince pie, you can roll it in any way it likes. Because you've got the sort of gum in there, then I find that actually you don't need to be too precise, and it works really well. So roll it out in between 2 sheets of cling film like this, and I'll just quickly show you. Chris, do you want to do a quick close-up as I cut it through? It might be useful. And then you can just move your pastry around. And now obviously I'm going to just quickly show you a mince pie, you know, it's not that difficult. But this pastry would also be really nice for pasties or savoury pies. So this is a really good one for, you know, a whole range of different types of recipes, sweet and savoury. So I just want to show you how easy it comes out, to be honest. What you do is, if you use your cling film just to help you, you can see there, this is really nice and malleable. It doesn't break, it's not cracking, it's a really good recipe. So if you're not used to making your own mince pies, and I'll just put this on here, if you're not used to making your own, really give it a go with your own pastry, because it does work. And I mean, I'm going to be really honest, I make a lot of mince pies. My kids love mince pies, but equally, this recipe is so easy. I will just give the recipe to the boys and they will make it themselves as well. So, you know, it's quite fail-proof, to be honest. And then either, if you like the sort of stars, then you can top them with stars or just another circle of pastry. I think my boys quite like the stars. So this is the homemade mincemeat. And again, that really doesn't take a lot of time to make. It's a really straightforward recipe. And then I'm just going to get a couple of stars. My boys are helping the scouts today, so they're going to be hungry. Just give it a little bit of a glaze as well, so that you can stick it on. And you know, mince pies about 190 degrees C, 20 minutes, and they're done. So I'll just do the other one. And it's a very, very easy way of making your own and making them gluten-free and much healthier in a way if you're using your own mincemeat as well without all that fructose. Now the other nice thing, of course, is with this pastry is that you can roll it, re-roll it, roll it, re-roll it, and it absolutely doesn't break out. So what I often do is just sort of squeeze it all together, put it back in the fridge, and then I might use it for something savoury if I didn't want to make loads of mince pies. The other thing that I often do with mince pies is I will make up a whole batch like that, and then I will just stick it in the freezer uncooked, and then when I'm ready to actually cook them, you can then put them straight in the oven from a frozen state, and you just cook them for a little bit longer. So again, if you want to get ahead, this is a perfect way of getting ahead. Make your pastry in advance, keep it in the fridge, make up your mince pies, freeze them, and then you can cook them when they're ready. And you know, my boys, you know, love making these, and they're so easy. So I hope you've enjoyed that quick cook along. So Panettone, please do make it yourself. The recipe will be on our website shortly, so please don't worry. And have a go at making your own mince pies, and your own gluten-free short crust pastry. It's a really easy recipe. And the puff pastry, if you want to give puff pastry a go, again, that's on our website, and you can look at the YouTube demonstration of how to make your own puff pastry as well. So have a great Saturday, everyone, and I hope you enjoy our recipes, and hopefully we'll see you soon again. Have a great day.